Hello children, this is Manish Sir. Very good morning. Today we are going to finish the chapter Mother's Day, in which we were discussing about the presence of Mr. Charles and Mrs. Pearson, Fitzgerald, Doris and Cyril at Center Hall, and how the soul of each other reacts each other, and Mrs. Pearson, having the personality of Mrs. Fitzgerald, reacts to her children as well as her husband. What impacts and effects does he get and changes in her family? Let you know. We have to explain the page number 50 onwards. Mrs. Fitzgerald, we must change back now, we really must. When Mrs. Fitzgerald, having the inner personality of Mrs. Pearson, thinks that everything is going on enough, so she wants to change her soul again with the soul of Mrs. Fitzgerald. She says that we must back now. Mrs. Pearson, why? Why to be back now? Mrs. Fitzgerald, because this has gone for enough. This is really enough, and they have been learned a lesson. So we should be back now. I can see they all are miserable. They are so sad. I could see it and can't bear it, and it is unbearable. It is unacceptable to me being a mom. Mrs. Pearson, a bit more of the such would them good, making a great difference already. If you stay some more time, they would get a different changing in themselves, because they are being changed. So I should do something more. Mrs. Pearson, a bit more of the same would do them good, making a difference already. She moves to the right to the table and sits. Mrs. Fitzgerald, no, I can't stand any more of it. Mrs. Fitzgerald, she says that I can't stay anymore. Just quick and change our soul with each other. I really can't. We must change back. Hurry up, please, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Mrs. Pearson, having the inner personality of Mrs. Fitzgerald, wants to react them more and more, so that they'll be sure and make sure that they will react properly to Mrs. Pearson when she'll change the soul with her. So she says that, please don't enforce me to change it back again. But Mrs. Fitzgerald, having the inner personality of Mrs. Pearson, she enforces that she can't stand anymore, she can't wait anymore. She wants to change the soul again. Hurry up, she requests and politely says to Mrs. Fitzgerald. Mrs. Pearson, well, if you insist, Mrs. Pearson, as you know, still the soul of each other are there in their body. So Mrs. Pearson, having the inner personality of Mrs. Fitzgerald, says, okay, if you insist, if you want, just I want to change it. Mrs. Fitzgerald, yes, I do, please. She stretches her hands across the table eagerly. Mrs. Pearson takes them. Okay, they followed the same process as they did to exchange their soul with each other. Mrs. Pearson, quiet. She is in hurry. Okay, and she wants to change the soul as soon as possible before they come. Mrs. Fitzgerald, oh well, I enjoyed that. Mrs. Pearson, I didn't. I did not enjoy that, because you were learning a lesson, you were reacting and talking, you were busy, but I was sitting all alone at your home, so I was not enjoying it. Mrs. Fitzgerald, well, you ought to have done. Now listen, you should have enjoyed your time staying at my home, but if you couldn't, then leave it here and listen me carefully. Mrs. Pearson, don't go soft on them again, else it all will have been wasted. If you are going to treat them again politely, apologizingly, these will be ruined and all will be wasted, whatever I did. Mrs. Pearson, I'll try not to, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Okay, I'll try my best not to do that, Mrs. Fitzgerald. They have not had as long as I'd like to have given them another hour or two's. Rough treatment might have made it certain. If I'll treat them in the same way, so it will be certain and definite that they will never react you as usual. Mrs. Pearson, I am sure they'll do better now, though I don't know how I am going to explain. I believe, Mrs. Pearson, she says that I believe that I I want to see them in the same manner or in the same way as they reacted me, but only I want some changes in them. I don't want them to feel so bad by this reaction. It means we are just talking about the personality of Mrs. Fitzgerald and Mrs. Pearson. Now they have changed and they are original. Okay, if you are going to read the dialogue spoken by Mrs. Pearson, so exactly she is speaking the dialogue. Okay, because just on the last page, last paragraph of 50, the process is going on and they have changed, doing the same process as they followed first time. Mrs. Pearson, it's all right for you, Mrs. Fitzgerald. After all, they aren't your husband and children. Mrs. Pearson feels so sorry that they are not your husband and children. So I could feel what they are feeling nowadays and how bad. Mrs. Fitzgerald, now you listen to me. You admitted yourself you are spoiling them and they did not appreciate you. Okay, don't blame at me. Mrs. Fitzgerald says that, don't blame at me. You told me to treat them a lesson, to give them a lesson, because they don't appreciate you, they don't admire you. Whenever you react them well, most of the time you work hard at home, but there is no thanks, there is no value of yours in your family. So you told me to do, there is no explanation and you will be straight back where you were. If you are not doing so, then you will be back straight where you were. So always keep in the mind that you have to be strict next time. I am warning you, dear, just give them a look, a tone of voice, and now and again to suggest you might be tough with them if you wanted to be. It's my humble request and suggestion to you. Mrs. Fitzgerald says to Mrs. Pearson that if you want to have some dignity, some respects and a good reaction on behalf of them, you must be strict. Okay, you have not to be as polite as you were. Mrs. Pearson, how? Mrs. Fitzgerald, well, what is it what is it you'd like them to do that they don't do? Stop at home for once. Just she wants to give some example so that to prove the process whether it is working or not. She says that, what do you want to do them? Should I stop them once at home? Mrs. Pearson, yes, and give me a hand with supper, and also tell them or do something like that so that they will help me for supper for my works. Mrs. Fitzgerald, anything would like them to do that you enjoy whether they do or not. It's my promise and confidence that by or after this activity, after this lesson, as I reacted them, they will accept everything, the wholesome, whatever you want to do them. Okay, whatever you want them to do, they will accept everything. They will never underestimate or ignore you. They will always appreciate you. Mrs. Pearson, well, I like a nice game of rummy, but of course I hardly ever have one except at Christmas. Mrs. Pearson says that I want to play a rummy game with them because I never played except the Christmas day. It is only possible for me to play on Christmas day. So I want to play it with them. Mrs. Fitzgerald, that will do then. Okay, yes, okay. Everything will be fine and they are going to do it just after a short period of time. But remember, keep firm you are if you had it. Okay, but always keep in the mind, if you want to be respectful, and just obey it in your family. You must be firm and strict. She opens the door, calling, "You can come in now." And remember, a firm hand. Okay. Now Mrs. Fitzgerald is about to leave from Pearson's home. However, she remembers and reminds Mrs. Pearson that you have to be strict and remember it forever. Doris, George, and Cyril file in through the doorway, looking apprehensively at Mrs. Pearson. They were very strange looking at Mrs. Pearson, because they thought that Mrs. Pearson is treating and reacting us very badly. So they are looking strangely at Mrs. Pearson. "I am just off to let you enjoy yourself." Mrs. Fitzgerald says that, "I am going to take off. Okay, I am going to my home." The family looks anxiously at Mrs. Pearson, who smiles much relieved. They smile back at her. Okay, all the family, Doris, Cyril, and George, all of them are looking at Mrs. Pearson because they were treated so badly by her. As Mrs. Pearson looks at her family, she smiles, and they also smiles in the response. Doris anxiously, "Yes, mother. Do you want to say something?" Mrs. Pearson, "Seeing that you don't want to go out, I tell you what I ought to will do. Okay, you are not going outside, so just I want to tell you what to do today." Mrs. Fitzgerald, giving a final warning. Remember, when Mrs. Fitzgerald is about to leave from Pearson's family, she gives a last warning to Mrs. Pearson. "You remember, okay, what I said, you remember it." Mrs. Pearson, "No objections, I hope. Okay, everything would be fine. They will never object me." George, "No, mother, whatever you say." George also agrees with Mrs. Pearson. "Of course, I am agree with you whatever you tell me to do." Mrs. Pearson, "I thought we had have a nice family game from me today, and then you children could get supper ready while I have a talk with your father." Mrs. Pearson says that, "I want you both children go and prepare supper for today, and I want to have some talk with your father." George, "Suits me. I like it. I want to talk to you. What about you two?" George asks to Cyril and Doris that, "What do you like?" Cyril says that, "Yes, that's all right, Pa. You want to talk with with mom? So do it." Doris, "Well, Mrs. Pearson." "What is speak up?" Doris, "I think it would be lovely." Doris and Cyril, they both are agreed to prepare supper. They are agreed to work, okay, for their mother, and Mrs. Pearson is going to have some talk with her husband, George. Mrs. Pearson, "Goodbye, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Come again soon." Mrs. Pearson bids goodbye to Mrs. Fitzgerald because she was going to leave from there. Mrs. Fitzgerald, "Yes, dear, night all, have a nice time." Okay, she went from there, leaving them in their family, and now they begin to live their life happily. So Mrs. Fitzgerald exists left, and the family cluster around mother as they gathered at a place around their mom, Mrs. Pearson, and they began to converse with each other happily. So from that moment, they were learned a lesson, they were given a lesson, and they are reacting well. It means they finally understood that we were wrong, and we must give respect to our mom, and every husband, daughter, son must give some respect to their elderly people and to their parent. That's it. Keep learning and have a nice day.